Hey guys, as you can see, I am not at my home studio. I'm at my parents' house, and so one of the things that's happening in DC, there's the virus going around, the coronavirus, and everybody's quarantined. There's actually fines being given to people that are out and about. But I wanted to do a challenge with you guys. I'm actually going to post the link to get this reference in the description of the video, and we're going to start the new sculpture. And one of the things I'm asking you guys along, everybody that's watching, maybe all two of you that are watching, let's try and build the sculpture. And I'm going to show you exactly what to do with my dog Sophie. We can start working on a sculpture, and that's going to keep us a little bit more sane during this entire time that we have to stick around the house. Actually, it doesn't really affect me very much because I'm always inside the house, other than just going out and riding a motorcycle. But I wanted to show you how to start the sculpture. We are going to be doing a kneeling pose, and this was provided free from postspace.com. Postspace.com is the usual place where I go and get reference from. It's really good, and they have great references, and for sculptors it's excellent because you can get all sorts of photos in 3D. This is the clay we'll be using. It's called JMAC clay. It's really fantastic. It's one of the better clays I've ever used, and I like that it's almost like water-based clay. It is just so fluid, so soft. Little chunks, because we'll put this into the microwave really quick. Throw it all in here, and we're going to throw this in the microwave. The clay is nice and soft. Now what we do is we orient our styrofoam. This is actually a little bit taller than what I like, but it'll work. This is the way to go though. It's so soft. It doesn't hurt your hands to kind of push it around. And I'm using rigid foam. Last time I used the one that's all bubbly and stuff, and it didn't work out very well.
Early in the morning, just trying to let the sun in and open up my eyes.
And of course we have our clay, and it's still relatively warm, but if your clay needs to be a little bit warmer, you can just put it in the oven or the microwave for a short amount of time. But this, what I'm sculpting now, is the thigh, and I'm looking at the model. You should always have your reference up if you have your computer up. And now this is going to be the leg going back. We don't have to be too exact. And try and build your sculpture to be a little bit thin, on the thin side, instead of making it too thick and too fast. By the way, this is kind of a bad base, so remember that when you're sculpting, to have a very good base. My other sculpture stand is a lot better than this, but I want to just establish the shapes first. Let's add clay to this. As you can see, this is it's a very rough way of doing stuff. Now I'm going to start building the torso. The torso is going to be at this shape right here.
Viceroy, as it's getting later, heading for the corner, already running dry.
At this point, one of the mistakes I already made is that I made the base a little bit too tall. But if I ever cast this thing, I'd probably like reduce it to about here or so. I think it usually looks better. You can't have too big of a platform when you're doing this, otherwise it looks like a tiny little statue in a big base, and that's just not a good look. But it's easy enough to fix, and since I put foam in here, I could even take a saw and just kind of slice it off. I'm just not that interested in doing that just yet. I have some more clay here that I heated up, and one of the things that is happening here, and if I turn it this way, what happens is that he has his right arm and he's putting it on the ground, almost like a superhero sort of style. So that means that the right shoulder is going to be much further down, and there's a tilt to the entire shape of the shoulders, like the torso is twisting. One of the things that you need to establish right off the bat is how the shoulders are twisting and how the hips are twisting. Today, the way I try and work with clay is that the first day that I try and work on my sculpture, I basically just want to get the gesture. And once I get the gesture, it's easy enough to start putting in the details. So the idea right now is that you just want to add little bits of clay, establish the general proportion, try and look at what is happening in the model, and add little bits of clay at a time. As you can see, I have my reference up, and I'm always trying to look and seeing what is happening. Because of the clay and there's no armature inside, what tends to happen is that this will start going down. And you always have to keep that in mind. Even when you're working with water-based clay, your sculpture tends to go down because of gravity. Everything gets pushed down. So with this, if you establish this torso and you see that it's kind of coming down, you could take a little bit of clay and kind of prop it in here just so it can support itself. But because it's oil-based clay, it's always going to be going down because I don't have an armature inside. This way I can pretty much remove arms, remove pieces I want to work, and I can establish details without keeping the entire sculpture whole. It makes it a lot easier. So here's that arm, and if I show it from here, you can see it's starting to take some shape. Forced to be inside, and you kind of feel like this is the way a lot of artists are. It's a job that requires a lot of alone time. So my arms and everything are on the thin side. This is how I usually like to keep a gesture. I don't want to get it too thick, and the reason you don't want to get it too thick is because it'll be much harder to move around. So of course, let's add a little bit more on the shoulder so it doesn't come apart. And now, one thing that's actually getting in the way is the stick here. I might remove it. But first, I just want to build up this arm, make big movements to get everything the way you want and keep everything nice and flat. I like to use a very big tool like this to kind of just straighten things out. Don't get carried away with details, because I think a lot of people in the beginning, they like to do details and it's not about the details. It's better to have a sculpture that's almost abstract, that's got a good style to, than making something that's realistic and it's like all off. Tools nice and flat, you're basically defeating the purpose of like creating detail, and that's what you need. So with this, I pretty much am starting to get that gesture. So another tool I like this mostly for water-based clay, but because it's a little bit, you create very flat planes with this, but this works well if you hold it by the blade and you just make these very smooth It's not smooth, but flat planes. So you can even call it facets. You know, in 3D work, polygons and things like that, everything's got a flat plane. And actually, a lot of these 3D artists that work with ZBrush and stuff really know anatomy well. So here we are. This is the first day I got the gesture done, and you can see it's pretty rough. It's kind of lumpy. You know, normally with water-based clay, it's a lot easier to do a gesture, and I find that with plasticine-based clay, it's a little bit more difficult. So if your idea of working with clay is making things nice and quick, water-based clay is for you. But plasticine, I do like it a lot just because there's dust usually associated with water-based clay, and then you have to keep things wet, and you have to put plastic bags over it so it doesn't dry out so you can continue working. I do like that oil-based clay, I can just put it out, leave it out, and I can just keep working on it for months and months. And of course, there is a major downside with oil-based clay is that you have to make a mold of it, because that's the only way of getting a full permanent reproduction. But since I've been starting to learn how to do mold making, it hasn't been that big of an issue. But the problem is, like, I go into these poses that are kind of difficult to mold because they have a lot of these things called undercuts. I kind of like to think of them as more negative spaces and stuff. So these are more complex to make molds because you have to like do sections at a time. But this is our stay-at-home sculpture. I'll be doing more of this, and we'll kind of work on the sculpture together. I'll put a link in the description below where to get this pose from, and we can just stay in together and work on the sculpture. And thanks for watching, guys. I will see you in the next video. Bye.
I'm only trying to calm down, just trying to keep it cool.